All right, let's play a game. And it was developed of highlights instance into minute rapid and let's play a game. I want you to close your eyes and synchronize your watches. The year is 2030. Now, imagine you aren't you anymore. You are the supreme leader of the world's newest, scariest superpower. You're sitting in a bunker that's buried a mile underground. The air smells like recycled oxygen and fear. Sitting around the table with you are 12 generals, and they are all terrified of you. If they sneeze without permission, they disappear. You possess the largest armada in human history, a standing army of millions, and an ego that takes up more space than the room itself. You slam your fist onto the mahogany table. The wood cracks. You look at your trembling generals and you issue the command that has haunted the dreams of conquerors for 2 centuries. You say, "Bring me the United States of America." Now, for the sake of this war game, and just so we can really isolate the crazy variables we're talking about today, we need to use a little magic. We have to apply a massive handicap to the defenders. Let's assume that some cosmic referee blew a whistle, or maybe Thanos snapped his fingers. Poof! The United States Armed Forces? Gone. Evaporated. The carrier strike groups patrolling the South China Sea? Vanished. The nuclear triad sitting in silos in North Dakota? Offline. The Reaper drones orbiting the Middle East? Gone. There are no Marines in the barracks at Camp Lejeune, no Air Force pilots at Nellis. What's left is just the raw board game, the geography, the civilians, the factories, the physics of the North American continent. You, the supreme leader, look at the map and you grin. You think, well, this is checkmate. Without their navy, the Americans are naked. We'll be drinking champagne in the Oval Office by Thanksgiving. If that is what you're thinking, I have some bad news. You aren't just wrong. You are about to lead your people into the greatest meat grinder in human history. You are marching your legions into a demographic and economic funeral. Because here is the truth that maps don't show you. The United States isn't just a country defined by borders. It is a geographically weaponized fortress. It is a continent-spanning citadel designed by plate tectonics, hydrology, and sheer dumb luck to consume invading armies. From the second your landing craft scrapes the seabed, assuming you even survive the trip over, you are entering a losing war against distance, thermodynamics, mud, mountains, and a civilian population that is armed to a degree that makes the most hardened insurgents of the 20th century look like they were bringing a spork to a gunfight. So forget the hypersonics, forget the cyber warfare. Today, we are stripping all that away. We are doing a forensic audit of the bedrock realities, the dirt, the mileage, and the math that render the United States unconquerable. Fasten your seatbelts. We are going to school, and the subject is logistical horror. We have to start with the first filter, the boss monster, the obstacle that has served as the graveyard of imperial ambition for centuries, the oceanic moats. Look at the map. Really look at it. To the east, you have the Atlantic. To the west, the Pacific. We tend to think of these as just water. We see a blue shape on a map and think, oh, we just sail across that. No. These aren't just bodies of water. These are logistical deserts of incomprehensible scale. Let's talk about the tyranny of distance. If you are launching this invasion from Europe, you are looking at a transit of roughly 3,500 to 4,500 nautical miles just to get within shouting distance of the eastern seaboard. If you are coming from Asia, God help you. The challenge compounds exponentially. You have to traverse nearly 6,500 to 7,500 nautical miles of deep, hostile, storm-tossed ocean just to see the beaches of California. To understand why this is a death sentence, we need to look at history. We need hard data. Think about Operation Overlord, D-Day, June 6, 1944. This was the largest amphibious assault our species has ever attempted. The Allies, the combined might of the US, UK, and Canada, had to cross the English Channel. Do you know how wide the English Channel is at the Strait of Dover? 21 miles. That's it. On a clear day, you can stand in Dover and literally see the cars driving in France with a pair of binoculars. A strong swimmer can cross it before lunch. And yet, to cross that tiny, miserable sliver of water, it took years of industrial preparation. It required the total economic mobilization of 3 global superpowers. It required a logistical tale that consumed millions of tons of steel, fuel, and food. Now take that logistical burden, the millions of tons of supplies, and stretch that supply line by a factor of 300. You aren't crossing a channel. You are crossing a void. Let's talk numbers. Let's talk about force-to-space ratios. The United States has a population of 335 million people spread over 3.8 million square miles. You can't just send a raiding party. You can't just send a SWAT team. If you want to occupy that land, you need boots on the ground to hold every street corner. A conservative estimate, and I mean conservative, is that you would need an initial invasion force of 500,000 combat-effective troops just to secure a beachhead and maybe grab a few key ports. 500,000 soldiers. You don't just teleport 500,000 guys, you have to transport them. And soldiers are needy. They need calories, they need water, they need bullets, they need spare parts for their radios, they need morphine. But mostly, they need the lifeblood of modern warfare. Consider the logistics of a single armored brigade combat team. A modern main battle tank, like the M1 Abrams or whatever equivalent you're bringing, doesn't measure fuel efficiency in miles per gallon. It measures it in gallons per mile. A moving armored division is a black hole for hydrocarbons. It drinks swimming pools of fuel every single day. To sustain an invasion force across the Pacific, you would need what logistics experts call a steel bridge. You would need a continuous, unbroken chain of supertankers and cargo freighters spanning the entire ocean, bumper to bumper, 24/7, for months. And here is where the comedy of the situation turns dark for the invader. Where are you going to park? In almost every major invasion in history, the bad guy uses a neighbor's house to get ready. The Allies used the UK to invade France. The coalition used Saudi Arabia to invade Iraq. Who was hosting you? Hawaii? Okay, let's look at Hawaii. It is an isolated archipelago 2,500 miles from the mainland. Staging in Hawaii to invade Los Angeles is strategic suicide. It's like staging in Lisbon, Portugal to invade Moscow, but with nothing but water in between. It gives you no tactical advantage. It just gives you a slightly closer place to starve to death. And let's not forget the element of surprise, or rather, the total lack of it. You cannot hide a fleet of 10,000 ships. The sheer maritime tonnage required to move an army this big creates a radar and satellite signature that would be visible from Mars. You aren't sneaking up on anyone. The assembly of such an armada would take 6 to 8 months. The moment your first ship leaves the dock, the United States knows you are coming. The American economy, which we will talk about later, pivots instantly to a total war footing. By the time your armada finally crosses the international dateline, your soldiers have been stuck in the bowels of transport ships for weeks. They are battling seasickness. Their muscles are atrophying. They are psychologically degrading from confinement. And what awaits them when they finally see land? Welcome to America. It hates you. The coastline of the United States is not a welcoming sandy beach from a Corona commercial. Let's look at the West Coast. It is geologically defined by plate tectonics. It's a collision zone. That means it's a rugged wall of cliffs, treacherous subduction zones, and violent currents. There are very, very few deep water ports capable of handling the draft of heavy military transport ships. You are basically looking at Seattle, the Bay Area, Los Angeles/Long Beach, and San Diego. That's it. These aren't open doors. They are choke points. They are kill zones. If the American defenders simply scuttle a few massive Panamax container ships in the shipping channels, which takes about 20 minutes to do, or if they blow the gantries on the port cranes, your multi-trillion-dollar navy is instantly rendered useless. You can't dock. You can't unload. Now you are left trying to offload 70-ton main battle tanks onto a rocky beach using hovercrafts while taking fire from the cliffs above. Have you ever tried to move a tank through wet sand? It's not a strategy, it's a comedy sketch. Okay, you say. I'll go east. The East Coast presents a different but equally fatal set of problems. Sure, the coastal plain is flatter, but the water is shallow. The continental shelf extends miles out. You can't get your big ships close to shore. Plus, you have the barrier islands and the swamps of the southeast. The entire coast of Georgia and the Carolinas is basically a muddy sponge designed to eat trucks. And if you try to land further north, the eastern seaboard is the most urbanized corridor on planet Earth. You aren't landing in a field. You are landing directly into a concrete megapolis. From D.C. to Boston, it is one continuous city. Every building is a fortress. Every window is a potential sniper's nest. You aren't fighting a field war. You are fighting a siege, block by block, from the moment your boots hit the pavement. Otto von Bismarck, the Iron Chancellor who united Germany, once said, "God protects fools, drunkards, and the United States of America." He wasn't joking. The geography of the oceans is the manifestation of that protection. For the invader, the Atlantic and Pacific are not highways. They are liquid walls of death. Fine, you say, adjusting your monocle in the bunker. The oceans are a trap. I get it. I'm a genius tactician. I will bypass the coastal defenses. I'll pull a flanking maneuver. I will land my armies in Canada or Mexico, establish a base, and simply drive across the border. Congratulations. You have just traded a naval disaster for a terrestrial nightmare. You have walked out of the frying pan and jumped directly into a blast furnace. Let's look at the northern approach, Canada. You land your forces in British Columbia or Nova Scotia. You have successfully put boots on North American soil. Welcome to the Canadian Shield. For those of you who aren't geologists, let me explain what the Canadian Shield is. It is a massive expanse of exposed Precambrian igneous rock. It is some of the oldest, hardest rock on Earth. It is overlaid with a thin skin of acidic soil, millions of lakes, dense boreal forest, and a terrifying substance known as muskeg. Muskeg is diabolical. It looks like solid ground. It's covered in moss and grass, but it is actually a bottomless peat bog. If you drive a tank onto muskeg, it doesn't get stuck, it vanishes. The earth literally swallows it whole. And the infrastructure? Canada is huge, but the roads are sparse. The system is designed to support a small population clustered near the US border. There are almost no north-south superhighways in the remote north, capable of supporting the weight and width of an armored invasion column. If you land in Vancouver and try to push south, you are immediately funneled into the Cascade Mountains. You are forced into narrow mountain passes where a single demolition team can blow up a mountainside and block the road for weeks. If you choose the east, landing in Quebec, you have to march through the crushing density of the Appalachian Range and the forests of New England. And then there is the weather. History teaches us about General Winter. The Russian winter destroyed Napoleon. It destroyed Hitler. Well, the North American winter is just as mean, but it comes with more moisture. Your hydraulic lines will freeze. Your diesel fuel will turn into gel. Your soldiers will lose their toes to frostbite. And you are attempting all of this while occupying Canada, a nation that is culturally indistinguishable from the US in many ways. You think Canadians are polite? Wait until you try to invade them. You will be fighting a fierce guerrilla campaign against your supply lines in the snow. So the North is a frozen dead end. You pivot. The Southern strategy. Mexico. You land at Veracruz. You intend to drive north. Welcome to the Sonoran and Chihuahuan deserts. This is not just sand. This is a biome designed to dehydrate and kill biological life. You are marching an army through an arid wasteland where temperatures regularly exceed 120 degrees Fahrenheit. Water sources? Non-existent. You have to truck in every drop of water your soldiers drink. But the terrain is secondary to the logistical geometry. The US-Mexico border is nearly 2,000 miles long. But ask yourself, how many places can you actually cross with a tank? The Rio Grande acts as a natural moat for a huge stretch. You can't just drive a 70-ton vehicle into a river. You need bridges, and bridges are easy to blow up. And once you cross the border, where are you? You aren't in the industrial heartland. You aren't in New York or Chicago. You are in the vast, empty void of the American Southwest. You are in the deserts of West Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona. The distances here are mind-bending. If you cross at El Paso, Texas, do you know where you are? Nowhere. You are still 1,400 miles from Chicago. You are 1,700 miles from Washington, D.C. You have to drag your supply lines, your fuel, your water, your ammo, across 1,000 miles of open, scorched desert with zero cover. But I'll steal their oil, you say. Texas has oil. Yes, it does. But the United States practices something called scorched earth. In the event of an invasion, the defenders will cap the wells. They will sabotage the refineries in the Gulf Coast. They will cement the wellheads in the Permian Basin. You will be driving into a continent-sized gas station that has been set on fire. History is a graveyard of armies that overextended their supply lines. The Wehrmacht in Russia, the US in Vietnam, conceptually. Invading the US through its neighbors forces you to create the longest, most fragile supply line in the history of warfare. You are trapped on the periphery. You can touch the continent, but you cannot reach its heart. Let's indulge your fantasy a little longer. Let's assume you are a wizard. You cross the oceans without sinking. You bypass the frozen north and the burning south. You have a beachhead. You pat yourself on the back. You tell your cabinet that the hard part is over. You are demonstrably wrong. The hard part hasn't even begun. Now you have to fight the land itself. If you landed on the west coast, look east. See that jagged wall of granite tearing into the sky? That is the Rocky Mountain Range. It stretches 3,000 miles from the Arctic to the Rio Grande. In places, it is 300 miles wide. The peaks soar above 14,000 feet. This is not terrain you simply drive through. There are only a handful of viable passes for major commerce. Interstate 70 through Colorado is an engineering marvel of tunnels, viaducts, and steep grades. In a defensive war, the U.S. resistance doesn't need to meet you in open battle. They just need to blow up the Eisenhower Tunnel. They need to drop the bridges in Glenwood Canyon. Suddenly, your invincible armored column is trapped in a parking lot at 11,000 feet above sea level. You are surrounded by vertical canyon walls. And occupying the high ground on those cliffs? Locals. Locals armed with high-powered hunting rifles capable of ballistic precision at 800 yards. You aren't fighting a conventional war anymore. You are fighting a magnified version of Afghanistan. The Soviet Union spent 10 years bleeding out in the Hindu Kush against a poorly equipped insurgency. The Rockies are bigger. The weather is more volatile. And the defenders here have thermal optics and precision weaponry. Your tanks will slide off icy cliffs. Your engines will starve for oxygen in the thin air. You will be picked apart. "Fine," you scream. "The West is a fortress. I will take the East." You capture New York. You take Washington. You occupy the I-95 corridor. Now, you need the food and resources of the Midwest. You look west, and you see the Appalachian Mountains. They don't have the sheer height of the Rockies, but they make up for it in density. The Appalachians are a green hell. Ancient, eroded peaks covered in thick, tangled hardwood forests. Historically, this terrain is an empire killer. In the 18th century, the British Empire, the premier military force of the day, could not project power into these hills. They were bled dry by irregular militias who knew every ravine, every creek bed, and every deer trail. Modern mechanized warfare hates forests. The canopy cover negates your air superiority. You can't bomb what you can't see. The geography forces your convoys onto predictable, winding roads in the valley floors, the hollers. These are natural kill boxes. A convoy moving through West Virginia is sitting in the bottom of a bowl. The enemy is everywhere above you, concealed by the leaves. Every bend in the road is an IED site. Every bridge is a choke point. Every tunnel is a tomb. Engagement distances drop from miles to meters. You are forced into brutal, close-quarters infantry fighting against a population that has hunted these woods for 10 generations. The geography of North America is designed like a medieval castle. The Mississippi Basin is the keep. It is protected by two massive curtain walls, the Rockies and the Appalachians. To win, you have to storm the walls. And the walls are miles high and shooting back. Let's transition from geology to sociology. Let's stop talking about rocks and dirt and address the single most terrifying variable in this equation: the American civil population. There is a famous quote, often attributed to the Japanese Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto. It's probably fake, but the sentiment is 100% real. You cannot invade the mainland United States. There would be a rifle behind every blade of grass. Let's look at the mathematics of that statement, because the numbers are staggering to the point of absurdity for anyone who didn't grow up here. According to the Small Arms Survey and domestic industry data, there are estimated to be over 400 million privately owned firearms in the United States. The population is roughly 335 million. Do the arithmetic. That is more than one firearm for every man, woman, child, and infant in the country. But babies don't carry Glocks. The ownership is concentrated. Roughly 40% to 50% of households admit to owning firearms, and admit is the key word there. And we aren't talking about your grandpa's rusty musket or a double-barreled shotgun for duck hunting. We are talking about modern platforms. There are roughly 20 to 25 million AR-15 style rifles in private circulation. These are semi-automatic, magazine-fed rifles that are functionally identical to the infantry service weapons used by most armies. Consider the deer hunter army. In the state of Wisconsin alone, during the opening of deer season, approximately 600,000 hunters enter the woods. If you were to organize the Wisconsin deer hunters into a standing military, they would constitute the 8th largest army in the world. They would outnumber the active duty personnel of France, Germany, and Iran. And that is just one state. That is just the people who bought a license. That's just the people who follow the rules. You might argue, but these are civilians. They aren't soldiers. They'll panic. They'll break against trained infantry and tanks. Will they? Let's look at the history of asymmetric warfare in the 21st century. Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan. In these conflicts, the world's most powerful militaries struggled against decentralized insurgencies armed with scavenged explosives and Cold War-era rifles. An American insurgency would be the best-funded, best-equipped, and most technologically literate guerrilla force in human history. They possess millions of rounds of ammunition. They own thermal optics. They have night vision. They have encrypted communication radios. And you aren't just fighting hobbyists. You are fighting the veterans. The United States has been in a state of near constant combat operations for 2 decades. There are approximately 18 million veterans living in the civilian population. These are men and women trained in logistics, demolition, long-range marksmanship, ambush tactics, and medical trauma care. They know how to manufacture IEDs. They know how to organize a squad. They know how to disrupt supply lines. Imagine occupying a suburb in Missouri. You set up a checkpoint. You feel secure. Suddenly, a drone purchased on Amazon for $500, rigged with a homemade shaped charge, drops a payload on your commander's vehicle. Precision fire erupts from 3 different houses simultaneously. By the time you return fire, the shooters have melted into the basement tunnels or the cornfields. This is not a war where you capture the capital and the nation gives up. The United States is a federation. If Washington, D.C. falls, Texas doesn't surrender. Texas mobilizes. Taking the capital might actually make the resistance angrier. There is no head of the snake. The resistance is hydra-headed and hyper-local. Counterinsurgency doctrine, COIN, suggests you need a force ratio of 20 soldiers per 1,000 residents to effectively pacify a hostile population. To occupy 330 million Americans, you would need a garrison force of 6.6 million soldiers. The entire active-duty Chinese military is roughly 2 million. The Russian military is half that. There is no army on Earth large enough to hold the territory. You cannot stand on every street corner, and the moment you turn your back, the blade of grass will pull the trigger. So, the people are shooting at you. The mountains are crushing you. The oceans are isolating you. But you think, if I can capture the infrastructure, I can turn their strength against them. I'll use their own highways. Here lies the ultimate irony. The American infrastructure is designed for commerce, not conquest. It is a logistical trap for an outsider. First, the scale. Let's talk about the time-distance factor. Driving from New York City to Los Angeles is a trip of roughly 2,800 miles. It takes 41 hours of non-stop driving in peacetime conditions. In a war zone, with convoys, that trip could take months. The U.S. relies on the interstate highway system. It is a masterpiece of civil engineering. But for an invader, it has a fatal flaw: bridges. There are over 600,000 bridges in the United States. If the American defenders decide to initiate a strategic withdrawal, they do not need to carpet bomb the roads. They simply need to drop the bridges crossing the Mississippi, Missouri, and Ohio rivers. The Mississippi River Basin is the aorta of the continent. It splits the nation in two. If you destroy the bridges, the east and west are severed. For the defenders, this is painful but survivable. They have the barge fleets and the local knowledge to utilize the river. For you, the invader, you are stuck on the riverbank. You are staring at a river that is a mile wide, with powerful currents. You have to try to erect pontoon bridges while under artillery fire from the opposite bank. It is a slaughter waiting to happen. Then consider the rail network. The U.S. has the most efficient freight rail system in the world, but it is privately owned, decentralized, and incredibly complex. It relies on specific switching stations and computerized logistics hubs. If the rail operators sabotage the switching software or derail a locomotive inside a key mountain tunnel, like the Moffat Tunnel in Colorado, the entire network seizes up. You can't just bring your own trains. The scale is too massive. You are forced onto the roads. This forces you back to trucks, and we return to the fuel problem. The Strategic Petroleum Reserve, the refineries of the Gulf Coast. In an invasion scenario, these facilities will be liquidated. Pipelines will be depressurized and sabotaged. You will find yourself stranded in the middle of Kansas, 1,000 miles from the nearest ocean, with an empty fuel tank, a blown bridge ahead of you, and an angry farmer with a .308 rifle behind you. This is the logistical black hole. The deeper you push into the continent, the weaker your supply lines become. Conversely, the deeper you push, the stronger the resistance becomes, because they are fighting closer to their own diverse supply caches. You are stretching a rubber band across a continent. Eventually, the tension becomes too great, and it snaps back in your face. Let's step away from the battlefield for a second. Let's look at the balance sheet. Let's assume you are a wizard. You bypassed the Navy, climbed the mountains, survived the insurgency, and fueled your tanks with magic. You are winning the ground war. You have just triggered a global economic apocalypse, and the primary victim is not the United States. it is you. This is the concept of economic, mutually assured destruction. The United States isn't just a participant in the global economy. It is the operating system upon which the global economy runs. First, the US dollar. It is the world's primary reserve currency. Approximately 60% of all foreign exchange reserves held by central banks globally are denominated in USD. Global trade, oil, gold, grain, microchips, is priced and settled in dollars. If you destabilize the US government to the point of collapse, the dollar's value hits zero. You might cheer, "Death to the dollar," but pause and think. If the dollar evaporates, trillions of dollars of wealth sitting in your own sovereign wealth funds vanish instantly. Your own currency, which is likely pegged to or collateralized by dollar-denominated assets, enters a hyperinflationary death spiral. Global trade halts because no one knows how to price a barrel of oil. You haven't just conquered a country, you have firebombed the bank where you keep your own life savings. Second, the digital backbone. Where does the internet live? It lives in data centers, a massive percentage of the world's cloud infrastructure. Amazon Web Services, Microsoft Azure, Google Cloud, is physically located on U.S. soil, particularly in Northern Virginia. If you start shelling data centers in Ashburn, Virginia, you don't just cut off Netflix for American teenagers. You crash the SWIFT banking system. You crash your own military logistics software. You blind your own satellites. You take down the global supply chain algorithms that tell your country how to feed its people. Finally, the brain drain. In the event of an imminent invasion, the United States would execute Operation Paperclip in reverse. The intellectual capital, the nuclear physicists, the AI researchers, the aerospace engineers, the cryptographers, they aren't going to wait for you to arrest them. They would board submarines and aircraft and flee to allied nations, the UK, Australia, etc. They would take the encryption keys, the source code, and the blueprints with them. You would capture Silicon Valley only to find empty glass buildings and wiped servers. The value of the U.S. economy is not in the land. It is in the innovation ecosystem. By invading, you destroy the very prize you sought to capture. You are shooting the pilot of the plane while you are a passenger in the first-class cabin. The crash will kill everyone. Finally, let's address the most mundane yet effective defense mechanism: bureaucracy and federalism. You think invading is difficult? Try governing. The United States is not a monolith. It is, structurally, 50 separate countries wearing a trench coat and pretending to be a nation. In a centralized autocracy, if you seize the palace and execute the leader, the state apparatus falls in line. The police obey the new orders. The army stands down. In the United States, the president has surprisingly limited control over the daily mechanics of domestic life. The governors command the National Guard. The county sheriffs control local law enforcement. There are over 3,000 counties in the United States. Each one has a sheriff, a distinct police force, unique local laws, and a profound sense of territorial pride. If you capture Washington, D.C., the governor of Florida does not kneel. He declares the Free Republic of Florida and mobilizes the state guard. The governor of Texas does the same. You do not have to defeat one government. You have to defeat 51 state-level governments, including D.C. and then pacify 3,000 distinct county fiefdoms. And never forget the American psychological profile. This is a culture born of revolution, founded on the explicit principle of telling the government to go to hell. Americans litigate against their own government over zoning laws. They protest their own police forces. How do you imagine they will react to a foreign occupier issuing edicts? You will face a campaign of malicious compliance, industrial sabotage, general strikes, and civil disobedience on a scale unprecedented in human history. The power grid will fail mysteriously every time you attempt to broadcast a victory speech. Water treatment plants will be contaminated. Roads will be blocked by accidental jackknifed tractor trailers. You will spend more blood and treasure trying to police the population than you could ever hope to extract in resources. It is a negative-sum game. The longer you stay, the poorer and weaker you become. Let's summarize the nightmare of your invasion plan. The oceans. You must cross thousands of miles of hostile water, vulnerable to submarines, with no staging ground. The neighbors. You must drag your logistics through the frozen, roadless north or the scorching, waterless south. The geography. You must push heavy armor through the Rockies and Appalachians, which serve as natural kill zones. The people. You must occupy a nation where civilians own military-grade hardware and veterans are embedded in every neighborhood. The logistics. You must maintain supply lines across a continent designed to be severed, with bridges that will be destroyed before you reach them. The economy. If you win, you destroy the global financial system and erase your own wealth. It is a suicide note written in blood. It is a logistical impossibility wrapped in a geographical nightmare and deep-fried in economic ruin. The United States does not require a massive standing army on its borders to remain secure. The continent itself does the heavy lifting. The Atlantic and Pacific are the moat. The Rockies and Appalachians are the ramparts. And the American people? They are the garrison that never sleeps. So, to any aspiring superpowers observing this analysis, do not do it. Not because of international law, not because it is immoral, but because you will lose. And you will lose in spectacular, humiliating fashion. That is the unassailable reality of American geography. It is the ultimate cheat code in the game of nations. If you enjoyed this descent into hypothetical chaos, do me a favor. Click that like button. It helps the algorithm more than you know. And subscribe if you want to see more deep dives where we dissect the terrifying realities of geopolitics, economics, and history. I want to hear from you in the comments. Which state would be the absolute worst to invade? Is it the swamps of Louisiana? The frozen expanse of Alaska? Or perhaps the mountains of West Virginia? Leave your thoughts below. I read the best ones. Thanks for watching. Stay safe out there.